Teamwork isn't just nice to have in business, it's the undisputed competitive advantage. When your team members work as a unified force, your whole operation benefits through higher productivity, thriving creativity, and unstoppable momentum. Welcome to the Impactful Teamwork Podcast, where we share with you strategies and tactics to help you develop game-changing teams so that you and your business can make a real difference in the world. Welcome back to Impactful Teamwork. So this week we have another exciting topic that we are going to explore, and this is the topic of how leaders can really scale their business without becoming stuck as the bottleneck, because this is a real problem that I've been seeing in businesses recently, particularly businesses that are growing and scaling. Leaders, they really deeply care about their people and their results, and they're really passionate about growing their business to the next level so they can make more contribution and create more sustainable momentum in the business. But here's the problem. The leader has become the bottleneck. And it's not because they're bad leaders by any shape or form. And it's not because they're weak. And often it's not because they're a control freak and they want to control for control's sake. But rather it becomes a case of, along the way, they wanted to become super helpful for their team members. And so when everyone asked them a question, they just responded. So they started becoming indispensable to the operation. And the problem is that the more that the leader becomes involved in everything, the more they become the bottleneck, and that causes decision drag within the business. So if you can resonate with anything of what I've said there, please stay with me for the next 15 minutes, because I think this is one of the most important shifts a leader can make when they want to stop carrying the weight of the business on their back. And I so relate to this problem because when I was in the corporate world, I very much became the bottleneck in the business. Everything went through me. I'd founded my business unit. It felt like it was my own business, and everything channeled through me. And now reflecting back on it, I really didn't give my team members as much opportunity to grow and develop and for them to share the burden with me as I could have done. So this is what we're going to unpack today. And what the real thing that as a leader and the skill as a leader that you need to learn is actually how to coach more. Because when you coach your team more, you start empowering them more. So what do we mean by coaching? We don't mean hovering over team members, micromanaging them, making sure they do whatever we want them to do. It's not about us answering questions faster. It's not about attending every meeting. What you really need to do is think about how can you stop being the final port of call in everybody else's thinking. Because as a leader, I think that we have one responsibility. And as our leader, our responsibility is to develop our team members. And so if we keep answering everything and making every single decision, we can't develop our team. So what is this hidden cost of being what I sometimes refer to as the answer person, the bottleneck in the business who's got the answers to everything? When I've been talking to leaders a lot recently, they often don't see this as a point of burnout, at least not initially. What they kind of experience is a kind of fog and a mental clutter going on in their business. Their diary is full, but strangely, maybe you can relate to this, work always feels unfinished. One meeting blurs into the next, and we keep having the same conversations over and over again. And these priorities swirl around, but they don't land. And this is the really dangerous bit, because this often looks like leadership right from the outside, because you're in demand, you're involved, you're visible, and you're busy. But underneath, something else is happening. And actually, what's happening is your presence and you actually being there has become the operating system for the business. And so, what happens is your team members stop forming opinions because they know that you're going to arrive and do the hard part of the work for them. They stop making decisions and they're willing to wait for your blessing on it. They defer decision making to you. And they stop building their own powers of judgment because they keep borrowing your powers of judgment. And so what's happened now is the business is not scaling through capability, it's scaling through dependence. And quite frankly, that's exhausting for you, it's disempowering for your team members, and it creates decision drag all over the organization. And so decision drag isn't just slow decisions. It's about how many people that decision has to pass through before it's made. Because every time that decision stops before it's finally made, it drains energy out of the business and the team members. It creates hesitation. And often decisions get escalated. And as a result, a lot of the momentum in the business dies because there's a gap between what we discuss and what we decide. And so this is why it matters so much, because when every decision comes back to the leader, the business starts to move at one person's pace, typically the space they have on their diary. And actually, that's not leadership when we think about it. That's actually micromanagement, that's traffic control. And a lot of leaders have been taught to mistake this for importance. And I was guilty of this too in the corporate world. My ego loved the fact that everything had to come through me. But as some of you know, I eventually got to the point, again, that I didn't realize I was burnt out until I actually stopped and stepped away from the business. And I realized I was just going on adrenaline. I felt important when everything came through me. I felt I knew what was going on in the business. And I must confess, back in those days, I thought that's what leadership was. But actually, the horses teach us something very different, right? In a healthy herd, leadership isn't about one horse doing all the thinking for everyone else. It's about clarity, trust, responsiveness, and shared intelligence. And yes, there's leadership, and yes, there's direction. But there's also this distributed awareness. What I often talk about the shared leadership. Because the herd works because everyone is paying attention. And that is this concept of teamship that I often talk about. It's not top-down hero leadership. It's shared responsibility, mutual trust, and collective momentum. And that's why one of the levers of the Unbridled Teamship roadmap is moving from ego to echo, from moving from me to we. Why do leaders default to telling people what to do instead of coaching them? I think that there's a few reasons for this. And I can certainly relate to the first one. It's faster in the moment. We're busy, we've got a lot of things to get done. We delegate and empower team members to do something, and then they've got questions and they come to us looking for answers. And we immediately give them the answer because it's quicker than asking them to go and experiment and try something new. But the problem is when we give them the answer, people stop thinking. So we stop their creative thinking about how they would resolve the problem. The second is it actually feels generous. It feels like we're helping. It feels like we're unblocking the problems in the business, and it feels like we're being useful. And thirdly, it soothes anxiety, their anxiety and yours, because uncertainty is uncomfortable, right? We all know that. We're leading through a time right now of uncertainty and uncomfortableness because we don't know what's happening. And the fact that we have to slow down to coach can feel messy and it can feel a bit laborious because it takes a lot of time. Because thinking takes longer than telling people what to do. So sometimes as a leader, we suffer with this hard truth that if we're not reacting and deciding and approving and solving and rescuing people, then who are you as a leader? And that's the question that sits beneath a lot of the bottleneck behavior I see happening in businesses. And again, when I was in the corporate world, I certainly really relate to this. I relate to the fact that I liked to be a busy fool. That felt, I felt I was important if I was a busy fool. And actually, there was a real fear that if I empowered my team members and effectively delegated everything away, then what would my role be? What would I be doing? And yet, that's exactly what we should be doing as a leader. We should be delegating away all of our day-to-day work so that we can elevate ourselves and take a more strategic and a holistic view of the business. But for many of us, particularly those of us that have been promoted up the ranks to a leadership level, there's a certain security, isn't there, in digging into the weeds and staying where we have been before. There's that psychological comfort of doing something that we've already done. But this is what I want to say to you. You don't have to prove your value by being needed in every room, in every meeting. Actually, we prove our leadership by building rooms and building teams that work when we are not there. So the old model has always been about controlling. And the new model I'd like to suggest to you is about coaching. And this is one of the clearest shifts that you can make in the way that you operate. You move from control to coaching and connecting. And let's be very clear, this isn't fluffy language, this is performance language, because controlling creates compliance, whereas coaching creates capability. So let me say that again. Controlling creates compliance, coaching creates capability. Controlling creates dependency, coaching creates ownership. Controlling might get short-term movement, but coaching builds long-term momentum. So if you want a team that can move faster without everything escalating upwards, coaching is a non-negotiable. And when we look at the futures model, if you look at the landing page on businesshorsepower.com, you'll see this. We talk about the red and the green zones. And the red zone is where, as a leader, you feel you need to take responsibility for everything and your team members can't be trusted. Whereas the truth is, if we give authority and accountability to others, it will drive greater success. Because ultimately, what we want to strive for and how we get onto the green line is we have empowered team members that love the business as much as we do and actively work to make the business successful. And that's the shift. It's the shift from I have to hold it all to I have to grow the herd. So what does coaching actually look like? So when I'm saying to you, as a leader, you need to coach more. And you need to lead the way in how people think, how you help them build judgment and help them take responsibility for the next move. So how does coaching in leadership sound? It sounds like things like, tell me what you think is really going on here. What options have you considered? Why are you leaning towards X and Y? What is stuck? What decision actually needs to be made here? What would you do if I wasn't available? And what support do you need from me? And what can you own? That is coaching. It doesn't remove accountability, it actually sharpens it. It doesn't make you passive, it makes you more intentional. And it doesn't slow the business down, it stops the business from relying on your constant intervention. So one recommendation that you might want to do is start your meetings differently and start with this question, which is really powerful. What's stuck and what needs to happen for it to move? Because this one question changes the quality of leadership conversations. It's that what's stuck and what needs to happen for it to move. Because most meetings, let's face it, are really polite theatre. People report back on activity, they prove they're awake, everyone nods, nothing really moves. But coaching-led meetings are very different. They focus on friction. They focus on decisions and ownership and in movement. And instead of saying things like, we're 60% through the analysis, you get better feedback like, we can't move until legal clarifies the retention policy. Do we wait or do we proceed based on assumption? Now we're actually moving somewhere useful. Now we can coach, now we can decide. And we can see whether the issue is a capability gap, a confidence gap, a trust gap, or a genuine authority gap. And those are very different problems. Now, let's be clear, not every decision should be delegated. And coaching doesn't mean abdicating. And it does not mean that every decision belongs with the team. Some decisions really do need your authority, your cross-functional view, your willingness to carry the political cost. So the question is not, can the meeting happen without me? The question is, can the decision happen without me? And that's a really important distinction. So let me go over that distinction again because it's so important. So the question is not, can the meeting happen without me? The question is, can the decision happen without me? Because sometimes as a leader, your presence is essential. Sometimes it's actually the scaffolding, it creates the psychological safety, particularly when the team lacks authority or they lack confidence, or maybe they even lack context. And sometimes, even when the team has the authority, the confidence, and the context, they defer to you as the leader because our culture has trained them to do so. So a coaching leader gets really curious before stepping in and really starts asking these questions. What exactly is stopping the team from making this decision? Because delegation isn't enough. But the real crux of this is actually transferring judgment. Because the fix isn't this absence, the fix is this delegation with transferred judgment. Because many leaders can delegate tasks, but they keep hold of the thinking. They hand over the work, but not the authority, the action, but not the judgment, the doing, but not the decision-making muscle. So the team executes, but still keeps coming back to you for interpretation. And that's not empowerment. That is actually something that we call supervised dependency. Because the team is depending on us in order to make the decisions for them. So what does transferred judgment sound like? It sounds more like, where is the outcome we need? Here's the context that matters. Here are the guardrails. Here are what good decisions making looks like. Now, I want you to make the call and bring it to me only if these conditions are triggered. And that's a very different energy. That says, I trust you to think, I trust you to do, and I trust that matters. Because we know that trust is the bedrock of successful teams. Because high trust environments improve collaboration, communication, and performance. And I know from my own experience, I actually really learned this the hard way. And this shows a little bit of my age, because when I first started my role in the corporate world, it was the days when mobile phones were just coming. My boss was going on vacation. She went on a ski vacation out to, I believe it was Austria. And the only way I could get in contact with her was with a fax. Yes, those were the days. And I remember we had an item book. We did research, as many of in the hotel sector, and I had a publication from Wales Trends actually at the printers, and there was a big problem with it. And the thing was, I couldn't actually get hold of her. So I had to make a decision, and I had to trust my own judgment that I would make the right decision, because I actually hadn't been in the role that long when this happened. But I think it was probably a great experience for me, because it's always given me the confidence to make the decisions that need to be made when they're made. I don't defer to other people. I just make the decision that feels like it's the right decision in the moment. And to be honest, 9 times out of 10, I get it right. Sometimes I don't. But I do make a decision and things move forward. And what I really noticed today is that because leaders are so available, they're always at the end of a phone, that more junior team members keep deferring to them, to the boss, to the leader, because they don't want to make decisions. But actually, it's too easy for them to pass the decision to somebody else. So maybe what we need to do is take away the mobile phones from our junior team members, or be unavailable so we can't make those decisions for them, because that's the way I learned to do it. And, having to make decisions in the moment is also something I've learned from the horses. And the other thing I've learned from the horses is they don't care about the hierarchy. They don't care about a job title, and they don't care about how important I think I am. But they do respond to me being congruent, present, having consistency and clarity. And we know that if a leader is authentic and calm and paying attention, a horse will follow. But if the leader is distractive and performative and internally scrambled, the horse will tell the truth very quickly. And our teams aren't that different. Humans also read energy. They read whether you trust them. They read whether the words and the actions line up. And they read whether you're leading from fear or from steadiness. And coaching only works when trust is present, because without trust, coaching feels like interrogation. And with trust, coaching feels like development. So what are some of the practical signs that you might have become the bottleneck in your business? Let's make this really practical. The first thing is your teams ask you questions they could answer themselves. Meetings pause until you join them. People bring you problems without recommendations. Decisions are reinvented because nobody feels safe owning them. You leave meetings wondering, why were you there? You get copied into everything just in case because people don't want to make decisions. You start feeling indispensable, but you're also deeply tired. Your business is busy, but you're clearly not moving. And if this happens, please hear me, and I'm saying this with compassion. You haven't failed. It just means that your leadership architecture needs redesigning. So what are 3 leadership shifts that you can make this week? The first is when somebody comes to you looking for an answer, replace that with asking better questions. So don't answer first, ask a question, ask a coaching question. What do you think? What are the options? What would you recommend? And as I said, this will feel slower initially, but this is how you build up your team members to have a thinking mindset instead of coming to you for approval. You might also want to audit one recurring meeting that you do. Think about one meeting that you go to where your presence rarely changes the outcome. Step back or change your role. And instead of leading that meeting, ask what's stuck, what decision needs making, who owns the next move, and see what happens. And you might discover you've got a capability gap, a facilitation gap, or maybe you can discover that your team members can do way more than you've allowed them to do in the past. And thirdly, I encourage you to coach for judgment, not just for completion. So next time you delegate, don't stop the task, but share the reasoning, explain the trade-off, name the signals that matter, and clarify when the team should decide and when they should escalate. So put together those guardrails for them. And this is how you transfer judgment, and this is how decision velocity grows within the business. This is how you stop decisions dragging and how you create better leadership habits. Because you need more trust, you need more coaching, you need more clarity, and you need more shared ownership in the business, shared leadership. You need a team that doesn't just wait to be told. You need a team that knows how to think, respond, and move. And that's what teamship is all about. It's not leadership as control. It's leadership as connection, presence, and partnership. And yes, there will be moments when you still need to decide. Of course there will be. But that should be because the decision belongs to you, not because the culture forgot how to think without you. So as we bring this to a close, let me leave you with this. If your team always needs you, that might feel flattering, but it's not freedom. It actually creates friction. And if every decision has to travel through you, your business will only ever move as fast as your availability. So the real question isn't, how do I get better at answering everything? It's, how do I become the kind of leader who grows more leaders? Because the future doesn't belong to leaders with the fullest diary. It belongs to the leader who can create trust, coach judgment, and build a team that moves without waiting. This is how you stop being the bottleneck and how you beat decision drag. And it's how you create sustainable momentum in your business as you scale. So if this episode today's hit a nerve and you know your team is too dependent on you, then this is exactly the kind of work I help leaders and teams do. Through the Unbridled Teamship roadmap, I help build more trust, unlock greater contribution, and help teams become more adaptable so the business can move with less friction and more momentum. And if you want to explore where the biggest bottlenecks and decision drags are coming from, the next step is to take the Turbocharge Your Team audit, which you can find at businesshorsepower.com/quiz. Because your business doesn't need more heroic rescuing from you. It actually needs a healthier team and a healthier herd. So until next week, bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the Impactful Teamwork Podcast. Please stay tuned for future episodes and do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating on your favorite platform. Recommendations are essential for attracting new listeners. Please follow us on social media at Julia Felton and at Business Horsepower. And if there are any topics you'd like us to cover on future episodes, please do let me know. Remember, you and your team are always making an impact. What impact will you make today?